and we can see your screen.
All right, awesome, everyone. Hi, my name is Mclendon. I am a senior consultant at Hitachi. I have about 10 years of experience uh, working with different business objectives through everything IT. My role at Hitachi is to basically help our customers with the big digital transformation with their business using D365 and Power Apps. So that's a little quick introduction for me. Before we get started, this is my offer to the presentation guides. Let's hope that my demo goes well and there aren't too many hiccups. Who doesn't like tequila with lime? All right, so this session, it's about universal resource scheduling. We're going to talk about developing an enterprise-grade solution, and we want to consider all things about scheduling our resources. So we're going to talk about a customer journey, what the employee, the end user's experience should be, some of my own personal learnings. And if we have time, there'll be some Q&A. We're going to have a demo this time. So what we'll demo is we'll demo change notifications, basically how to get your data from Exchange into D365. So scheduling. Scheduling in D365, what is it? Well, Universal Resource Scheduling, it's the engine that allows you to place your resources where they need to be. We've seen the schedule board. We're familiar with the interface. If you're not, there's a picture of it here in the slide deck. But you can see it's used to put your resources, your people, in the right place at the right time. But it's the main engine used for scheduling those resources in D365. But what are the differences? What are the differences between resource scheduling versus activities? Because one might say, well, we have activities for that. We can put an activity record in, and we can have our sales reps or whoever know they need to, send an email, make a phone call, write a letter, send a fax, right? We know what activities are. What's the difference between resource scheduling and activities? Well, activities are really event driven. They're indicated by me. They're for follow-ups, right? The difference is resource scheduling. Those are tasks that are personally assigned to me to help you get at the right place at the right time. It's where somebody wants you to be. So resource scheduling is how you get from point A as an appointment, basically, that tells you right where you need to be at the right time, right place. Activities, those are just random tasks for regular housekeeping. So what are the pros and cons to URS versus field service? Because we hear those words being thrown out all the time. Well, for scheduling, it's the engine, or it's the main piece that allows you to schedule anything in D365. So you can really use it for sales. It's not just tied in with field service, but you can use it. You use it commonly in field service. You can use it for customer service, project service automation, or you can have a custom entity. But really, it's a separate application. It's a separate application. It's not necessarily something that comes with or is with field service. We use them all together all the time, but they're really two different applications. So, pardon me, I guess my slide just moved up and down. Really, for field service though, let's break it down a little bit more. So they're two different applications. URS is used for scheduling. Field service though, its bread and butter is based off of work orders, assets, inventory, and mobility, right? So work orders are the assignments that are given to their technicians, but when your technicians are given these assignments, they don't know when and where to go. Well, that's where URS adds an additional layer to it, helps it out. It tells your technicians where they need to go, when, and it has all that information so they can get to the right place at the right time. Um, but when we look back at URS really focuses on organizing your resources within your organization. So let's say you have 1,000 sales reps or 1,000 field technicians. How are you going to divvy out where and when they need to go to their assignments? Well, that's why we use URS. And we publish that information via schedule board so that they know where they need to go. So it's really a separate product that other applications or other offerings like sales and CE or customer service use. So now let's see how we use how we use URS. So for our use case on our customer journey, we had to schedule leads. So we took the leads entity and we said, hey, leads, we want you to work with URS, and we want to be able to take our leads that we get and find out how we can accommodate them. So our request method was from a website, a portal. But other organizations use different request method. You can come in and make an appointment in person or call in. We had to also be able to check the resources availability, see the person that they're going to talk to. Will they have time? Are they booked at 2 p.m. on October 17th? You know, what's the best location? If this is on a website, how do we get resource A, B, and C to customer A, B, and C? Are they 50 miles away, 10 miles away? How do we get all that information? How do we marry them all together? The solution that we created, leveraging URS, really helped give what that desired income is, what that desired outcome is. Increased revenue. Customers get to the right resources. Isn't it a great thing when you're able to go to an organization and you're able to get to the right person? They know exactly what you want. It's just a good feeling, right? You didn't have to search and call and be transferred here, transferred there. No, it's like love at first sight, right? But for the business, this was an increase. This positive feedback added an increase to appointments. So customers were more prone to go to their portals or to go to the organization and say, hey, can you please get me, I have this problem. Can you please get me to someone who can help me with it? Yes, sir. You're available do you have any availability between these times? Yes, I do. Great. You're all set and ready to go. So using URS for leads is really can help us get to the positive outcomes that we want. So our scope, again, let me define it. This was a major retailer, and they needed to get customers to their field techs who were able to address their needs. So this was a major construction organization. So when a customer wanted a specific thing like such as fencing, they needed a fencing expert to be able to go out there and accommodate them. So our project delivery and our turnaround time was roughly about 2 months. So we had to hit the ground running. So that's why we use some of the out-of-the-box features that were within URS. Also, we needed to have the field reps. We needed to know when they were available and when they weren't available. So we had to make sure that their appointments in Outlook were also going to sync with what was in that schedule board, D365. So we're going to look at some of these areas and how we address them. All right. So when building a solution such as this, there's some things you need to take into consideration. Quite frankly, you need to make sure your D365 infrastructure is laid out and everything is in order. So let's take a look at it, right? So you have territories. We use territories all the time. We use them in sales. We use them in field service, right? But primarily our territory plan had to be clear. So in our instance, we designed a territory structure where our field reps, there was one field rep to one zip code, and then zip codes to counties, and then, you know, counties to states, those different things. But our structure for our territory plan had to be clearly defined. So if you don't have a clearly defined territory structure, what's going to happen is your scheduling isn't going to necessarily sync correctly. You want it very legible. You want to be able to read it. You want to define it. Because if it's not clearly defined, things such as RSO, resource scheduling optimization, really won't work in the future. So when creating your territory structures, you want your territory structures to be just there. You want them to be lined up, clearly defined. Now, resources. What are resources? Well, resources are can be anything, really. They could be your field reps. They could be trucks, vans. They can be anything that you want to be in the schedule board, anything you want to be scheduled. You want your resources, that structure also to be clearly defined. So you want to have your territories, your resources assigned to those territories. And then we go to our next phase where we have resource requirements. And okay, resource requirements, this is really important. Resource requirements is what ties things like field service or work orders to the schedule board or to URS. Resource requirements is what notifies URS and says, hey, we need to schedule something. It's a record. It needs to be attached to a booking. And that's what says, hey, this customer needs XYZ. Help us find a resource to match that requirement. And that's what really, you want that also defined when you're making those records. And your infrastructure, again, I can't say it enough, that all circles back. So we want our territories, our resources, and our resource requirements to be just all clear. It needs to be beautiful. I cannot stress enough, clicking on the next slide, cannot stress enough. You have to have a clearly defined territory structure. It doesn't work without it. When your territory structure is complex, I'm afraid to use the word overly complex, but why not? When your territory structure is overly complex, it just causes problems. RSO won't necessarily work with it. Resource scheduling becomes very, very complicated. You want to make sure you have a well-defined resource structure, and don't be afraid to say, hey, there may be some change management involved when going on site and analyzing these factors and trying to address it. There may be some changes. So don't be afraid that can be a common thing that you see when designing and building at scale. Some other things you want to consider. Work hours, time zones, when are they going to arrive to the location? Is there a set time for appointments? Are there durations? Characteristics, basically saying, can resource A, is he a specialist with fencing, or is he a specialist when it comes to roofing? What are their skills? How good are they at that skill, right? Their roles. You want to have your resources, the people that are going to be scheduled, to have a clearly defined capability list, and also when they're available, because we're talking about putting people at the right place in the right time, right? So you want to make sure that you just have that nailed down very well before you launch and say, here we go. These are some things you want to consider. Now let's go back to resource requirements. I love this because some of our resources in this situation when we were building, they were identical, right? I love my stormtroopers, love Star Wars. The older stuff, we'll probably have a conversation about the newer stuff, but old school here. So some of our resources, man, everything was the same. So we broke that up with our rating system because we had people who were good at both fencing and roofing, multiple resources, but who was the best person and when were they available? That's what rating systems come in. Also geographically, who was closer to the request or the end user who was making that request, right? Who was the closest one? But when we were building this out, resource requirements initially wasn't considered. But in the end, we realized, yeah, we need to take a step back because this was a quick launch. Our turnaround time for this was 2-3 months. So there were some things we quickly glossed over, but in building, we were like, let's go back. This is important. So these are some of the things that we were looking at with resource requirements. Customer notifications. Now, this is really fun. How do you tell the customer, hey, your appointment was accepted? How do you do that? Well, there are many systems you can leverage, right? That'll send emails and texts. But those cost money. If you want to use something that's more in the lines of something that's in-house, Microsoft has opened it up by leveraging Microsoft Graph APIs. That'll help you get from point A to point B when notifying your customers. Or if we look down to the second bullet point, our sales teams, when they need to be pinged or notified, hey, you have an appointment with user 123. Yeah, we had to get those notifications, not just an email, but we had to put them on their inbox. We wanted to make sure, though, because we had a source, our system of record always had to be D365. So when you're going to get on site, you sit down with Mr. Customer, you get these requests, and you look at it, and you begin to look, and you say, wait a minute, it looks like you want your system of record to say when people are available or when they're not. It looks like you guys want it to be Exchange or Outlook or an Outlook calendar. That's not going to work. We want to get the two to play well with each other, right? So you want your system of truth. When is somebody always going to be available? You want that to be D365. And then you want to build from there. You want to build synchronization points. You want to get information from Outlook into D365, and you want your operators or let's say the portal, if you're going to use a portal, to have users look to see when those resources are available. You want that system of truth to always be D365. And then you want D365 to send out notifications or ingest data or munge data continuously at a certain point of time. You want your system of truth to always be D365. Do not let it be anything else. And that brings me to my next point. All right, so bookings. There's different options you can use, right? And you can have bookings synced to D365. So let's stop here for 2 seconds and let's break this down. What are bookings? Well, on the schedule board, if you think back to our earlier slides, you saw those blue sections. The schedule board knows that those sections in the calendar are taken or blocked off because it's referencing a bookings entity. And the bookings entity just contains records saying, hey, Will Mclendon, he is booked for a visit to Ben Vollmer's house from 3 to 5 on Saturday afternoon. He is not available. That's the record. That's the information that's kept in a bookings record. And then this URS then looks at the bookings entity and goes, oh, hey, let me put a block there. So your bookings are just nothing but records, simple records that the calendar is referencing. So how do we get those bookings, or how do we fill up that bookings entity, right? Or how do we get that information in the bookings entity? Well, you have different options. We look at some of our requirements. This will take us to another point. Let's look at time off requests for a second. Time off request is a separate entity, right? Time off requests, and it is a very clear-cut approach, a clear-cut way. Time off requests basically is when the user would need to say, hey, I'm going to be out for a few weeks. They simply put that in, tell us, hey, we're not going to be available, and you're good to go. So your initial thought when you hear that is like, oh, why don't we just have data pumped into time off requests and not directly into bookings? Well, time off requests work a little bit differently, right? Once a time off request is put into the system and it's been approved by the various structures or managers, in order to, let's say you had a vacation schedule for next week, the whole entire week, things happen, there's a coronavirus spike and you necessarily don't want to go anymore. Hey, I'm available to work. So you want to decline that time off request. Well, what you have to do in order to show that time for be available is you have to reset your calendar. You delete it and then you have your calendar to reset. So it's a very manual process using time off requests. It's not as automated as simply dumping data into the bookings entity. So time off requests, it is a beautiful thing if you're going to have your users say, I'm going to be off for vacation or for big blocks of time. But to show really the availability, it can be kind of cumbersome. So, don't let the word fool you. Take it with a grain of salt. But it's a very manual process. It has a wonderful out-of-the-box approval process already in play, but it doesn't necessarily give you that automated functionality that you want. We have appointments in D365. We're familiar with that, but you're going to have to take the bookings, and from bookings, you have to dump them to appointments. So there may be a Power Automate that might help you get to that point. But really, your performance is going to be key. That's a lot of overhead. That's a lot of work. So what are our options to make it automated? If you're like me, you like things to be easy. Well, you can simply go with Microsoft Bookings. Just dump data in there. There are third-party integrators such as Riva. There's also the D365 app for Outlook. You put it on the calendar, you track it, and it shows the availability there. And there's also wonderful Power Automate. Let's look more and more one by one. So bookings, we talked about it, man, it's easy. You create a record, it's right there. The deployment, it's already out of the box. It's super cheap. The downside is by default, bookings do not sync with your Exchange calendars. So there's no bi-directional sync. What do I mean by that? Okay, so I have a calendar. And let's say I put my availabilities in that calendar. Now, how is Outlook going to tell D365 when I'm free, right? How are we going to get that beautiful graph, those beautiful bookings? Well, by default, you can't get bookings to connect to D365. That just doesn't happen. So you really, really need to find something that does, or you can have your users just jump right in there and just start putting in their own availabilities using D365 URS scheduler instead of using Outlook. So we keep it in line with that original thought that the system of record, it's always going to be D365. So we just have our users come in, punch it into D365, and we're good to go. It's not Outlook anymore. Riva. I can't say enough awesome things about Riva. They're great. And if you want some folks to contact over there, I'll be more than happy to direct you to them. This is a SaaS offering. It gives you that bi-directional sync, right? So your end users, they can use Outlook and say, I'm available here, I'm available there. No, I don't want to be here. Hey, I got an appointment that popped up. Let me move it to this day. And it all syncs with D365. It's great. The thing is, they don't have to do anything on their end in Outlook. The users are completely oblivious to what's going on with the magic that happens in the background with Riva. The only thing I would say to warn you on would be the cost. It can be a bit pricey, but it's well worth it. Well worth it. The D365 app for Outlook. Love it. Absolutely love it. It's great. Why? Well, you already paid for it. It's free. Okay. It offers that granular tracking that you want, right? So what do I mean by that? If you have an appointment in Outlook, well, you simply right-click, track, and it's ingested into D365 and it shows your availability from there. There may be a little extra layer of magic you may need to add, but it gives you that bidirectional synchronization. Some of the disadvantages, you have to really think about the client and the end users. So for this particular case, those field reps they were a bit seasoned. That's the Southern way of saying old. And they did not like trying anything new. So they didn't want to have to right click and then click track for every appointment that they had. They didn't want that. They wanted that automation. So, and they also wanted something that they wanted that ad hoc response time. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you're like me and you have kids, you need to be able to you need to be able to drop at the dime and stop what they're doing, pick them up from school, take them to the doctor. So you need to set your calendar's appointments to reflect those availabilities. So they didn't want to put that time as blocked. And if it was ad hoc, it meant they had to go really fast. So they didn't have time to right click and hit track, because sometimes we do forget those steps. So the pros and cons to D365 app is really the cost, the granularity. It gives you that bidirectional sync. On the downside, user adoption can be a bit difficult depending on your crowd. Power Automate. Now, you see version 1. Power Automate is great. So what do I mean by what does it have? So out of the box, you have connectors that'll go to your mailbox, that'll sync to your mailbox or your calendar, and you can create your own various steps to have it go to bookings. Now, when I say it like that, I mean that it'll go to an individual mailbox, meaning that the first method that we use for Power Automate, one of the designs was, hey, each of your end users, your reps, they would have an individual flow in their own environment that would sync to D365, from Outlook to D365. You can imagine that would be a management nightmare. It's not very scalable, and the implementation and deployment time would just be too much. But it did give you the bidirectional sync. The other alternative that we used was Power Automate, Logic Apps. This version leveraged the two methods of grabbing data from Outlook and putting them into D365. So let me stop for a second and talk about those methods. You had usage tracking, and then you had change notifications. So usage tracking and then change notifications. What were the difference? So with usage tracking, we all have done backups before. And you remember how in our backups, we took a big full snapshot, and then we had incremental backups, and then we would just keep getting the snapshots every day. And then after 30 days, we would do another full backup, and then we get incremental. Well, Gesundheit. So usage tracking was like incremental. It used Delta tokens to take an initial snapshot, and then you would use the skip tokens to get those incremental shots of your Outlook data. So let's say you had 30 days of appointments, and you had 30 items in your event calendar. Monday we took a big snapshot, so we would get your 30 appointments ingested in a D365. Beautiful. Tuesday comes along, and if you're like me, you're like, yeah, my calendar moves, changes, shifts. After those moves, changes, or shifts, let's say we add another appointment, so now we have 31 appointments in our calendar. On Tuesday, we took the snapshot. What it would do, it would track all those moves and changes, and it would also grab the additional items that were added. And it would then edit those bookings that were associated to those events in Office 365. The problem with that is that the larger your organization, the more difficult or the longer time the process would run. That's what usage tracking. So there's another option that you have. It's called change notifications. And they all leverage graph APIs. Change notifications are beautiful because what change notifications does is it doesn't wait for that big full snapshot and then keeps taking the incremental backups. Change notifications are great because they say, hey, you subscribe to a notification. I want to know what happens to William's inbox for the next 3 days. That's the limitation, 3 days, and you have to keep recycling it. But anyway, that's more detail we'll get into later. But it says we want to know exactly what's happening to William's mailbox at this moment of time, and we want to know what items are created, what items are updated. We want to know what items are deleted or events are deleted. And you subscribe, and your Power Automate, when it receives those updates or those changes or these events or these deletings, it then ingests the data in a D365. Depending on that action, it knows whether to delete that item out of D365. Do we need to update it? Let's say Will wanted to change it. Do I need to create more events? It's very, very good. Change notifications are wonderful. The only downside is ease of integration can be a bit difficult, and ease of customizations can be a bit hard. Another downside is it's quite chatty. Change notifications, they send data all the time. They tell you about every little thing that happens in every person's mailbox that you subscribe to. And it can be quite chatty. But once it's up, it's quick, it's fast. And as you will see, there are different offerings that you can leverage to kind of help with the ease of the integration and deployment. So with that, I know you're tired of hearing me talk a lot. We're going to jump into our demo time. What we're going to see is we are going to look at change notifications that leverage the Graph API. We're going to view some of the offerings. In this case, I use Cosmos DB with Power Automate. So what I did is I created a Power Automate that said, hey, we want to look at our admin's mailbox. So we want to see when items were created. We wanted to see when items were deleted. We wanted to see when items were updated. And we wanted to take that data, dump it into Cosmos, because Cosmos is lightning fast, as you'll see. And we wanted to then take the data from Cosmos and push it into D365. So that's what we're going to see. We're going to see when I create an item in Outlook, does it show up in D365? When I update an item in Outlook, does it update in D365? And if I delete an item in Outlook, Kyle's smarter because Kyle was the smarter younger brother. I'm sorry, I just saw that. Larry, I'm going to get you for that. Yeah, we're going to see that those changes are reflected in D365. You guys are great. So let me share my screen. All right, awesome. So this is our environment. Let's take a look at the bookings entity. We see there's nothing here in the bookings entity. Let's also take a look at the schedule board. We see there is nothing in the schedule board. What we want to see, though, is that when I make an appointment, let's say we're going to make an appointment at 11 a.m. for Monday. Let's say I don't want to be, I want to take a long lunch, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. I'm a big guy, I love to eat, so I'm taking a real long lunch. We want to see that the booking is showed up here. When I create that booking record, we want to see it in here. But we're going to do all this using change notifications and Power Automate. All right, so let's have some fun. I made my offering to the demo god, so this should work. Monday, we're going to call it Will's lunchtime. And it gives you those wonderful icons. And we said 11 a.m. And we're gonna go long lunch, big guy. We're gonna save it. Now, let's go to the bookings entity, and we're gonna see how long that takes to create. Give it a second. I did. Now let's go to the bookings entity. Okay. All right. Minor heart attack, but we're all good. The demo gods, like, they got jokes, or they must be too drunk on their tequila. Now let's look at the schedule board. We see the start times, right? 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Let's go to schedule board. I said schedule board, not calendar. All right. Here we go, guys. So, wow. We see from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., right? Now that's great, sounds wonderful, but my wife called and she said, you need to stop taking long lunches and you need to make that shorter. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take this lunch. I'm gonna say, you know what, babe, you're completely right. And you know what, instead of taking a long lunch on Monday, I'm gonna take a short lunch, but on Tuesday, I'm gonna sneak out and I'm gonna go to Shake Shack. So we're gonna move it to, let's make it Wednesday. Everybody loves hump day. So we're gonna move it to Wednesday. Now, if the demo gods love me, we'll see that this event will go to Wednesday at the times that we mentioned. So the refresh is here is every 15 seconds. I'm gonna push it faster. Great, and you see that it moved from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Now let's have more fun. My daughter, who worries about my cholesterol, says you aren't going to Shake Shack. You aren't allowed to go anywhere. You aren't allowed to go to lunch. We want you to stay home. We want to watch what you're eating. So I canceled my lunch appointment. Let's see if that works. Come on. There we go. And we see that it's synced, right? Nothing in the schedule board. So let's take a second to analyze what happened here. And we're going to go through and we're going to look at a few of our my Power Automates and how we got from point A to point B. So I told the system I wanted to make a subscription to the user's inbox. What the system then does is it subscribes. I mean, it tells me, okay, William, great, we appreciate it. Your subscription ID, because it tracks it for you, is this here. And your change types. Your change type is updated, right? Now, let's pause. Let me help you out with this change type. There's 3 types of change types. There's create it, update it, and delete. I shake my head here because it gets a bit confusing and I'm going to make it as simple as possible. Created is when an event is created in your calendar, like when you make an appointment. So anytime you make an appointment, the system goes, oh, appointment was made, notify, notify, notify. And it gives you this event ID. Here, let me give you that, this long string of characters, this large event ID. Hey, this event ID, which is unique to every event in Exchange and users, it's completely unique, so you don't have to worry about that. Hey, it was created, it was created, it was created. Beautiful, we love that. It does the same for delete. You know what, I canceled that appointment. It'll say, hey, new change type, delete, kill that ID, kill that ID. Here's where it gets funny, update it. Update it sounds like it would just track events that are pre-existing and we just want to see what happens to them, right? We just want to track when they are updated. That's not what that means. Do not be fooled by the name. You will spend many hours scratching your head, asking yourself, why is this happening to me? Because that's what happened. Updated is a catch-all. It tracks any updates to the collection of items that are in your event calendar. So if you do anything like create, it catches it. It says, hey, here you go, and it tags it as update. If you delete an event, it goes, hey, there was an update to that event. It's been deleted, but we don't say delete it. We just say update it, and it throws it all. So when you're making your subscriptions, if you just want to subscribe to updates, that's completely fine. And then you can create your own system of tagging, whether you want to create, delete, or update. All right. But let's focus here on this. Let's scroll down to the resource. The resource here is users. This long string of characters is my Active Directory ID. And this event, like I said, is the unique string that identifies each event in a calendar. So let's have some fun and look at some more JSON, because we like JSON. JSON is awesome. Whoa, somebody failed.
Just a quick time check, William. We have about 8 minutes left, and we do have a couple of questions for you in the chat as well.
Awesome. So you know what I'll do? You know what? We don't need to show JSON. I just want to show one thing in Cosmos real quick, guys, and we will move on to the questions. Give me a second. Let me find where I'm at with Cosmos. Hold on. Cosmos. Let's look at my containers. Use the wonderful Data Explorer. I thought I had this up, guys. My apologies. Let's look at the exchange items. All right, cool. You can see it tracks this. This is the different JSON that I created. Cosmos is schema list, but I added this here, the ID, the action, and the status. So you see these are the a bit of the elements that come with the notifications. So with that, some of the project learnings that I had. Let me share my screen. Some of the project learnings that I had was that configuration is key. You have to make sure you're configuring things accordingly. You have to use, don't be afraid to use any of the items that are out of the box. Not a problem. Territory structures are incredibly critical, and be cognizant of the client's budget. That's a big deal. And allocate time to have that conversation with security team. Graph API is awesome, but its potential kind of scares or raises some red flags with security team. So make sure you're ready to have that in-depth conversation with them. Those are my personal learnings, and that's the end of my demo. I will now open the floor for any questions.
So there are a couple of questions in the chat, William. Not sure
Awesome.
if you can see them. They're actually from Reza. Am I totally butchering your name? Hopefully I'm not.
It's okay, yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead and just ask them, man. Go for it.
Yeah, sure. So William, thanks so much. It was a great session. You never stop teaching us new things. The first question I have is with the businesses going more towards like online and location agnostic service models, do you see any changes in the way businesses are going to handle territories? So that's the first question.
Yeah, that's why I threw that word out there, change management. They have to redefine it. Like their territory structure was terrible. And they, you know, in the South, we have this expression that says, God bless your soul, bless your heart, bless their hearts. They meant well, but we had to take a significant amount of time to realigning their territories. So businesses are going to have to look at their territory structures if they're going to get the best benefits out of any of the Microsoft offerings, like RSO, or if you just want to get URS packed and just wanted to really get it to hum, then yeah, you're going to need to realign your territory structure.
Perfect, thank you.
Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And my question was mostly towards like, how do you see like online businesses adopting the new territory? Like, what is their strategy like? But maybe it's just a loaded question and it requires just like a dedicated session to this, maybe in future.
No, it depends on their business processes and how their sales, how their sales are. That's basically how their org is designed. So we came up with the scheme. So in this case, they had a one-to-one relationship. So they have one rep to one zip code. So, you know, when we found that relationship, we said, hey, this is how your structure needs to be for your territories. So that was how we designed our territories. So really, you're going to have to take the time to find out, hey, what they have going on. And then you can have that conversation. Hey, you may need to redefine your territory structure. And it sounds like it's a very scary thing. And for some places it is. But the benefits outweigh any of the pain that you would go through.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? I see someone had a question about time off requests.
That's me again. I just didn't
Okay.
want to take time away from other people. So
If anyone has any other questions, I'll jump right into time off requests. All right. So time off requests, man. So we were going to leverage those time off requests as just like a way for us to get that available time, right? But what happened was, and this was my baby. I noticed that creating time off requests and deleting them doesn't necessarily, and there's a big nice line in it in the Microsoft documentation. So shame on me for not necessarily reading the devil's in the details. I missed that detail. But deleting a time off request record does not free up the time in their calendar. You have to actually reset that calendar or that user's calendar. So time off requests, they're really just used for, hey, extended vacations. They're not used for those ad hoc solutions like, hey, I'm going to be out tomorrow, or hey, I have to pick up my son or my daughter from school. You really just want to use time off requests more so for those big gaps that you know are definitely going to happen. So it's the most common integration pattern is we create those bookings and we create a booking method. So our booking method in this case, if I didn't have time to show it in my demo, those booking methods were called Outlook. So we were able to identify those booking records as Outlook, as opposed to, hey, this came from the portal. The operator would see that these were appointments that came from the person's calendar. Does that answer your question, man?
Yep, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Why is Kyle smarter? He was born younger and he got to see me make a lot of mistakes. I just want to go ahead on record and show that, all right?
Wait. You make that sound like it's past tense.
He's smarter now. Yes, he is. So yeah, that's my younger brother. He's awesome, man. So, and he's great in this community. He's doing big things. So I'm looking forward to doing more with him.
Well, he has you saying it now on a recorded session, so he's probably going to play it back to you over and over and over again. At least
Oh
that's what
yeah,
I
don't worry. There's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't hear that Kyle's smarter. So
just make it a ringtone. Make it a ringtone every time you call him. It's like, you know, you're
Yeah.
saying that he's smarter than me. He's smarter than me.
hey,
There you go.
I'm smarter.
Yeah.
So
Great. Thank you so much, William. We really appreciated you sharing and sprinkling your knowledge around. Guys, make sure to submit a survey for this session, right, to get entered to win that $50 Amazon gift card. Remember, right, every survey submission is an entry, so make sure you do that. Again, many thanks, William and Ben, obviously, for hosting you. And we will see you guys back in 10 minutes. We're going to do a quick break and we'll be right back at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time with EY Coleman. He is MVP, great guy, great sessions as well. We have such great people this time around. Well, every time basically. So thank you guys and we'll see you in 10 minutes.